What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. In this video, I'm going to be building an awesome $600 budget gaming PC for 2022, featuring the brand new Core i3-12100F. In this build guide, I'll be running you through all the component choices, the build process step by step from start right through to finish before testing this PC out with loads of the most popular titles. Everything from Apex Legends and GTA 5 to Fortnite, Valorant and CSGO. Let's dive into it after a quick ad from today's video sponsor. Corsair's M65 RGB Ultra Wireless builds upon the legendary M65 design with the latest Corsair Slipstream wireless tech and much more. With a 26,000 dpi Corsair marksman sensor that can be adjusted in dpi steps as small as 1, this mouse means business. Adjustable weight allows you to find your perfect center of gravity, while Omron optical switches deliver hyper-fast and precise responses. Everything you love about the M65 in 2021, now wireless. Check it out at the links in the description below. Let's kick this build off in style by installing as many components into the motherboard as possible, including the CPU, RAM and SSD, often referred to as the motherboard assembly. Of these four components, the two we need to focus on to begin with are the CPU and the motherboard. And in many ways, this processor is a big talking point of this build guide. Intel have come back with a bang as far as 12th gen goes, beating out pretty much all of AMD's offerings at some really great price points, and the i3-12100F is no exception. With 4 of Intel's performance cores but none of their efficiency cores, it also has hyper-threading, giving you plenty of multi-threaded performance for the latest titles, and includes a clock speed that boosts up to 4.3 GHz. Plenty of single-threaded gusto for making sure we get those nice high frame rates. The launch of these i3s also coincides with brand new motherboards on the new B660 chipset. In particular, I've picked up the Asus B660 Prime D4. Now, the D4 designation is really important. It means it's a motherboard which boasts support for DDR4 memory. Now that might seem weird, James, isn't the whole point of Intel's brand new 12th gen that we get fancy DDR5 support? Yes and no. For the higher end i7 and i9 CPUs, DDR5 makes the most sense. But for a build like this, DDR4 is not going to cause us any problems. Don't believe me? We've run some tests and you can see the difference on your screen now, which show a very nominal difference when testing with DDR5. At least nowhere near enough of a difference to justify another $100 or so on more expensive memory. That's enough of that though. Let's go ahead and actually install the CPU first. An unboxing the chip reveals one of the major advantages of the new i3, an included stock cooler that actually doesn't suck. That's right, Intel have brought to us a brand new included cooler that not only looks pretty decent, but also has more cooling nows for chips which inevitably put out more heat than the last generation. We can go ahead and simply pull up the arm on the Intel socket. It folds out from the bottom, not from the top, unlike the last generation, and then we can very simply drop the CPU into place, with the little golden triangle on the processor matching up with the bottom left corner of the CPU socket. Apply a little bit of pressure with your hand before then adding in our retention arm. The socket cover will pop off a lot earlier than on the last gen CPUs, and the processor is nicely installed. Remember to install thermal paste as well here if you don't have some pre-applied. I've used the cooler before, so a fresh dab of our own will do the trick nicely. To install the stock cooler, you can go ahead and locate all of the 4 plastic posts on each end. And these are actually tied up to quite a nice black metal kind of backplate, if you will. You'll see there's no threads on these screws because they're actually push pins. What that means is we can position the cooler onto the CPU and just push the pins directly through the holes. With a nice cool chilly CPU, we can next move on to the RAM or the memory. And this right here is a 16GB kit of Corsair's Vengeance RGB Pro SL, a slightly lower profile kit than the old Vengeance RGB Pro, which we'll be installing into the RAM DIMM slots. Now you might be thinking, James, you've got 2 DIMMs of RAM and you've got 4 slots on your motherboard. Perfect for upgrades, but how do you know which slots to pick? Well, in this build, you want the grey slots, aka the 2nd and the 4th slots. It's very often the way that you don't use the first one closest to the CPU, but if you're unsure, check your motherboard's manual, as this will provide more clarity. As you can see, installing the memory is a nice, easy process. Plenty of pressure on each side, nice and evenly, and it will clip into place. Once this is done, then the final thing to pop into the motherboard assembly is the SSD. Now in truth, any Gen 3 drive, not Gen 4 for this system, it does support those drives, but they're really very overkill, will work well. This particular Seagate drive boasts speeds in the region of about 3 gigabytes a second on the read and write. That's still about 5 times faster than the latest SATA standards, making it a great option. Unscrew the 2 small screws with a teeny tiny screwdriver from the M.2 heatsink, then pop the drive in and secure the SSD back into place. Don't slot the drive in directly straight, do it at sort of a 45-degree angle, pushing it down and then leveling it off. As you can see, nice and simple, and then our M.2 drive is in, and the motherboard assembly is complete. Big tick mark, lovely. The next stage of the build with the complete motherboard assembly is to go ahead and unbox our case, where we'll be installing the rest of the components. This is the one and only DeepCool MATREXX 40. This right here is a really awesome budget chassis choice from DeepCool. With mesh front panel, 2 RGB fans up front and a further RGB at the rear, it comes crammed with a wide range of features at a price point that really doesn't break the bank. In the nicest possible way, this puts some mainstream budget case releases to shame as far as features go. With plenty of airflow, our temperatures should be nice and low, and with support for relatively long GPUs, of course you're not going to have much luck fitting something like a 3080 Supreme in here, but any 3050, 3060, 60 Ti, if you wanted to upgrade the build later on, would fit no problem. This system is designed to be a perfect PC for the tier we're building it around. But I've also kept in mind upgrade paths, and if you can find a slightly better GPU later down the line, feel free to add this in and not worry about really any of the other component choices. At this stage of proceedings, I'm going to lay the case down flat, as that will make the next step, actually screwing in the motherboard, a lot easier. Now before you go all gung-ho, you grab your screwdriver and you start going to town on your chassis, there's 1 or 2 things you need to check, and these are really important. The first is whereabouts the holes on your motherboard are located. This isn't so you can count out the number of screws you need, but instead to make sure that all the standoffs in the case are in the right locations. In our build today, we need 3 at the top, this spacing is perfect, 3 across the middle, and then a further 2 on the bottom at slightly different levels. These are all in exactly the right place, but if the case you go for is designed for bigger motherboards, they'll be in the wrong place, so please don't make this error. It can be pretty catastrophic. Clip in the I/O shield to the rear of the case, then screw your motherboard in, and that's pretty much all there is to it. With the motherboard assembly installed, the next component is the graphics card, the beating heart of any gaming PC. And this is none other than the GTX 1650. Buying a GPU in 2022 is a bit of a difficult situation to find yourself in. Oh dear, the new 3050 is a really great choice if you can find one at a decent price, and while AMD's brand new 6500 XT is in stock, you probably shouldn't really buy one, if I'm being completely honest with you. Anything else higher end is hugely inflated as far as mining prices go, which makes something like a 1650 actually a decent choice, and hear me out as to why. Even if you pick one of these up secondhand, the likelihood is it's not been mined on particularly much due to the fact it doesn't really deliver any good mining results. It's also going to cost you a lot less than something like a 3060. Now James, that seems obvious, but if every GPU is inflated by 50%, this might be another $100, whereas a 3060 might be another $300 or $250. If the market returns to normal, you'll lose a lot less money on this card than you will anything higher end, making it, in my opinion, a decent choice. Plus, I mean, it performs really well for gaming at 1080p, the most important factor of this build. Now, when installing the GPU, you need to make sure that the rear PCIe slot covers you need to use are uninstalled. And to do this, I'm just going to hover the GPU over the slot. In our case, it looks like the top 2 are what we need, and they're already taken out, allowing us to simply push back the clip on the PCI slot and slide the card into place. You can see just how much extra length we have available for longer GPUs, making this system really well future-proofed. We even recently did a test where we coupled the this i3 with the new 3050. Check out our results in the card section now. Screw your GPU into place, and then we can move on to the final component and section of the video, the power supply, cables and wiring. Picking the right unit for this build can be a bit of a dilemma. If future-proofing is really what you're after, a 650 watt 80 plus bronze unit will work well. But for us and our humble little 1650, this 500 watt jobby from Cooler Master is the perfect option. It isn't modular, but the cables are all black, which is a much better upgrade than cheaper units out there, and it comes with a decent warranty from a reputable manufacturer. Making sure you go for a power supply from a name brand with good reviews is very important, and you can find all our recommended parts linked at the affiliate links in the description below. This case has a power supply shield, making the power supply nice and hidden and aesthetically giving us a bit of an upper hand, and means we can very easily go ahead and slide the unit into the back of the case, securing it through the 4 screw holes like so. Once you've done that, you're then going to plug in your motherboard power connector to the right hand side of the motherboard, CPU power connection to the top left, and all of your front panel connections. These are the I/O on the top of the case and includes USB 3, normal USB, HD audio, which goes to the bottom left of the motherboard, and your JFP1, fiddly front panel connections I call them. These are your little pins that do your hard drive indicator LED, power button, reset switch, and they can be difficult. So check out the diagram on your screen. If you get it wrong, don't panic, nothing's going to happen. Your PC just might not turn on first time. And once we've done that, we're ready to boot the system up for the very first time to check out just how well it performs in all those titles I mentioned earlier. But first, we need to see how good it looks in typical GeekaWhat style, with an epic glam montage in the only way we know how. I'll see you in a second, but first, roll that montage. I don't care if they're talking about us. No, I don't care if they put us down. Looking good, this budget powerhouse certainly appeals visually, but does the performance match up with our expectations from a system like this? Well, we've tested a wide variety of games from the latest AAA titles to older esports games at 1080p to see what mileage we can achieve. On your screen is a summary of the temperatures, the CPU and GPU, and all of the frame rate numbers we pulled in. We're going to take a closer look title by title, starting with GTA 5. A game where we tested at 1080p, normal settings, and ran the in-game benchmarking mode. We managed to get 134 frames per second on average. Wow, that's a pretty crazy frame rate from GTA, with strong 90 and 99 percentiles too. Moving on to the brand new Battlefield 2042, and here at 1080p low settings, we did manage to break the 60 FPS barrier. You can see for yourself whether low settings visually is appealing and good enough for you, with the gameplay captured on your screen now. The frame rate never really dropped below 57 either on the 99th percentile, giving consistent results from this budget system. But what about COD Vanguard? Well, at 1080p low settings, we pulled in 71 frames per second. Once again, significantly breaking the 60 FPS barrier. For one of the latest games to perform this well is incredibly impressive. We also tested out the brand new Forza Horizon 5, once again using the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode, running at 1080p medium settings, where we pulled in 75 frames per second on average. Strong 90 and 99 percentiles once again show that we could probably push to 1080p high and still break the 60 FPS barrier. But what about Halo Infinite? Another new title out there. Well, at 1080p low, we managed to break 60 frames once again. The 1650 showing it can bring in very competitive frame rates if it needs to. 62, 57 and 51 for the 90 and 99 percentiles was really solid. Moving on to Apex Legends next up, at 1080p medium settings, we once again smashed through the 60 FPS mark, and definitively this time, 85 frames per second on average, with 77 and 68 for the 90 and 99 percentile results. Valorant was also very positive, 208 frames per second at 1080p high, though no surprises there, while Fortnite at 1080p competitive settings, everything tuned down to low, render distance set to far, gave us 134. 134 frames per second from a 1650, crazy. Finally, to wrap things up, we also tested out Call of Duty's Warzone, where we got bang on 60 FPS at 1080p, but did have to tune the settings down to low admittedly. Bit of a shame, but visually still looked acceptable in my opinion. And Overwatch, A game where at 1080p high settings, we pulled in 123 FPS on average. Wow. I've tried to dive through these nice and quick, but full unedited gaming benchmark runs can be found at the link below and over on our benchmarking YouTube channel. But that just about wraps it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to get subscribed to see more from us. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.